Welcome to the DX Today podcast, where you get facts, not hype. Today, we're diving deep into a topic that affects everything you see, hear, and trust online. The crisis of the synthetic messenger.
It really is a crisis of trust.
It is. We received sources for this deep dive outlining a really profound and immediate problem. The public, the media, and perhaps most critically, the regulators, are collapsing two very different concepts into a single terrifying category. They're taking synthetic media, which is, a neutral, often transformative tool, and they're conflating it entirely with deepfakes, which are, by definition, malicious acts of deception.
Right.
So our mission today is to really dissect this conflation, drawing some sharp lines around intent and utility to hopefully protect the immense, valuable utility of the underlying technology.
And that mission is, well, it's urgent. If we fail to make this crucial distinction, we risk what the material calls the semantic and functional collapse.
That's a great phrase.
It is. It's where the language we use to describe the technology ends up poisoning the application of the technology itself. It just stifles innovation in areas that are genuinely essential for modern society, like accessibility, global education, and rapid communication during crises.
So this isn't just an abstract debate about algorithms.
Not at all. It directly impacts where capital is invested, how major platforms moderate their content, and at the end of the day, whether you, the user, can actually trust what you see online.
That's a powerful way to frame it. We are essentially facing a modern digital version of that ancient dilemma. The impulse to shoot the messenger, even when the messenger is completely innocent.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's unpack this. The source material is remarkably clear on one thing. The underlying technological engine, whether we're talking about generative adversarial networks or GANs.
Or the newer diffusion models, yeah.
Right, or the massive large language models that drive the scripts, it's fundamentally the same across both good and bad applications. The technology is just mathematics. So the difference has to come down to intent, the message being delivered, and crucially, the provenance of that message.
Precisely. The AI avatar is nothing more than a digital construct, a hyper-efficient vessel driven by neural networks. We have to start blaming the pixels for the human purpose they were instructed to serve.
Right.
And just to reinforce your point about urgency, this confusion isn't just stalling innovation. The sources highlight that it creates a really profound side effect. The liar's dividend.
Yes.
This is where the mechanics surrounding deepfakes become so intense that bad actors, well, they gain a strategic advantage. They can simply dismiss genuine evidence as being fabricated.
That's the core threat, isn't it? If everything looks potentially fake, then nothing can be trusted as real.
Exactly.
So to counter that, we have to separate the signal from the noise, and that starts right now with some really clear definitions. We need a taxonomy. So if you're prepping for a meeting, or maybe just trying to sound knowledgeable at a dinner party, this taxonomy is your intellectual armor. We've identified 3 critical categories of AI-generated content, and they must be understood in terms of their purpose, their consent structure, and their level of transparency.
Let's start with the neutral, largest category, synthetic media.
The big umbrella.
The big umbrella, yeah. At its core, this refers to any media, so video, image, audio, or text, that has been partially or fully generated, altered, or augmented using AI or machine learning models.
So this is a really broad, benign capability.
Hugely broad. It encompasses everything from the computer-generated imagery you see in blockbuster movies to the highly sophisticated text-to-speech engine that's running your GPS.
Or even the background noise suppression on a video call.
That's a perfect example. It's foundational technological infrastructure, not an inherently nefarious act.
And the defining characteristics that elevate this technology to what we're calling legitimate synthetic delivery are pretty clear. It's utility, transparency, and consent. When we talk about utility, what we mean is the AI is acting purely as an interface. It's a vessel for data visualization. And here's the crucial intellectual pivot you have to make. The message, so the factual data, the script, the legal compliance manual, it exists independently of the messenger.
The avatar of the AI voice.
Exactly. The AI is simply making that pre-existing message consumable.
And that's a key distinction. Think about the example of an AI avatar reading verified, human-checked meteorological data. It is performing a function. It's visualizing complex text as a spoken performance. It's a highly efficient, massively scalable function, and it is entirely distinct from deception because the underlying data is transparently sourced.
Right.
This utility is the engine driving industry bodies like Tech UK to advocate so strongly for distinguishing it from deepfakes.
And the economic and logistical benefits mentioned in the sources are just astounding. Imagine you're a large multinational corporation. You need to produce a mandatory employee training video in, say, 140 different languages to meet global compliance standards.
That's a logistical nightmare traditionally.
A total nightmare. You're talking about weeks of production time, hiring 140 different voice actors or on-camera talent, booking studios, managing complex translation inconsistencies.
And expensive reshoots every single time a regulation changes.
Right. The cost is prohibitive and the speed is, well, it's glacial.
And synthetic media just changes the physics of this whole problem. With a single verified English text script, that video could be instantly translated and rendered by 140 different synthetic avatars in minutes.
In minutes.
Yeah, that's not just a cost saving, it's democratizing access to education and compliance on a global scale. The key takeaway for the utility of synthetic media is its ability to create content that is logistically impossible or just prohibitively expensive through traditional means.
So it's an engine for impossible content creation.
It is, and the integrity of the data input, the message, is absolutely paramount.
Okay, so we've established the legitimate messenger. Now we have to turn to the dark side. It's, I think, fascinating and really important to remember that the term deepfake wasn't invented in a lab somewhere.
No, it has a specific origin.
It does. It originated on Reddit in 2017, and it was specifically referring to hyper-realistic image and video manipulation with explicit deceptive intent, usually centered around sexual exploitation. This is the origin of the toxicity that has poisoned the well for this entire category.
The key differentiator here is what the sources identify as the severance of truth and the violation of consent. That's the litmus test.
Right.
In a deepfake, the likeness of a real identifiable person, their face, their voice, their digital identity, is hijacked without their permission. They are then forced to deliver a message they never authorized, never spoke, and fundamentally do not endorse.
This is so much more than just editing a photo. It's a fundamental breach of what the sources are calling the chain of custody of identity.
That's a great term for it.
You are stealing someone's biometric data, their voice print, their facial structure, and you're attaching it to a fabricated scenario. It's digital identity theft at its absolute highest level of sophistication.
And we can actually categorize the harm into 3 core primary violations, which is useful for, legal understanding.
Okay.
First, you have identity theft, which is the unauthorized and non-consensual use of a person's biometric data. Second, there's deceptive context, where the subject is placed in fabricated scenarios or made to utter statements that never occurred.
And third?
And third, malicious intent. This is where the ultimate goals are clearly fraud, disinformation, reputation damage, or non-consensual sexual exploitation, also known as NCII. The intent is inherently unequivocally harmful.
So if the legitimate synthetic media is a trusted vessel delivering a verified message, the deepfake is the imposter delivering a fabricated message.
Precisely.
And here lies the catastrophic difficulty for regulators and for the general public. To the naked eye, the legitimate synthetic weather anchor and the imposter delivering a fraudulent bank transfer request. They look identical.
They do. Both are just sophisticated arrangements of pixels generated by neural networks.
So the distance isn't something you can see.
No, the difference is purely in the invisible attributes, the provenance of the input data and the consent of the subject. The human visual system is fundamentally broken as the ultimate arbiter of truth in the face of this technology.
So we have to rely on evidence beyond the pixels.
We have to, which forces a reliance on cryptography and digital credentials, the digital ID we're going to talk about later.
Okay, but before we celebrate the utility of the legitimate messenger, we have to talk about the third and maybe the most pervasive corrosive category, AI slop.
Ah, yes. The noise.
This is what pollutes the medium, right? It fuels general fatigue, and it makes people instantly suspicious of any AI content, good or bad.
Slop is the perfect term for it. It's low-effort, high-volume synthetic content produced primarily for monetization, so algorithm hacking, driving clicks, or just pure attention generation. It fundamentally lacks substance, quality, or genuine meaning.
It's the digital equivalent of spam.
Exactly. It's technically synthetic media, but it doesn't have the measured utility of legitimate applications or the targeted specific malice of deepfakes. It's just noise.
And we've all seen it. The sources detail that endless stream of incoherent AI-generated articles flooding search results, often just regurgitating content for ad revenue.
Or those viral, slightly surreal images.
Right, the shrimp Jesus example that was mentioned. Images that are technically flawless but are fundamentally nonsensical. They're generated cheaply, quickly, often without any human oversight, designed only to catch an algorithm's eye, not to inform or educate or entertain in any meaningful way.
And the impact of this slop is subtle, but over time, it's devastating. When you're constantly bombarded with this low-quality, nonsensical, or just aesthetically jarring content, you start to associate all AI-generated material with low quality, with deceit, and ultimately with waste.
Right, it prejudices the entire user base against substantiated synthetic delivery.
It does.
That's the unfair burden. A legitimate AI weather anchor reading a verified forecast has to spend the first 30 seconds just convincing the audience that they are not another piece of low-quality junk content scraped off the internet.
They are fighting through an ever-expanding ocean of low-quality noise.
And it forces legitimate actors, like news organizations, to work exponentially harder to distinguish their signal of verified data from the growing volume of slop. So understanding this three-part taxonomy, utility, imposter, noise, that's the essential first step toward defense.
It really is.
Okay, we've drawn the definitional lines. Now we have to prove the value of the synthetic messenger. If we're going to fight this impulse to kill the messenger, we need rock-solid, concrete case studies that show where this technology is already providing essential, non-malicious utility today. We need to make this distinction tangible for you.
And the news industry provides some of the most visible and early adoption examples of the synthetic messenger, particularly in regions like Asia, where the demand for 24-hour coverage clashes directly with shrinking budgets.
That's a good point.
These organizations are using AI anchors to deliver news more efficiently, more quickly, and more accessibly, but crucially, not to fabricate the news itself.
Let's start with South Korea's MBN, the Male Broadcasting Network. They introduced an AI version of their lead anchor, Kim Joo-ha, remarkably early. This was back in 2020.
Right, they were a pioneer.
They really were. And this wasn't some cheap CGI trick. The avatar was rigorously trained on over 10 hours of her own video footage to meticulously capture her specific cadence, her subtle expressions, her professional gestures. It was a dedicated effort to clone her authoritative presence.
And the utility that MBN gained from this is critical for a modern news operation. The avatar allows the network to broadcast breaking news 24/7 instantly.
Which is vital during fast-moving emergencies.
Exactly. Or late-night hours when human staff are, rightly fatigued or just unavailable. The AI ensures that critical verified information is disseminated instantly without any lag.
But the human element remains.
Absolutely. The script itself is still written and fact-checked by human producers and journalists. The AI is purely the instantaneous, tireless delivery system.
Now let's contrast that with Kuwait News' Fetha, introduced in 2023. This case is a perfect illustration of that shoot-the-messenger response we are trying to combat.
Oh yes, the reaction was very telling.
The intense public debate that erupted after Fetha's introduction, it didn't focus on the accuracy of the sourced political and financial reporting she was delivering.
No, it was all about her appearance.
Exactly. The criticism focused almost entirely on the medium, her striking appearance, her blonde hair, her blue eyes, and the broader, speculative implications for human employment.
That is a textbook category error. The medium, the avatar's aesthetic design, completely overshadowed the message, which was sourced, verified facts. The anger was displaced onto the pixels.
Aggressively directed at the synthetic existence of the anchor rather than the journalistic substance of her report.
Yeah.
And if we look toward the future, we're seeing startups like Channel1.ai in the US pushing this concept toward hyper-personalized news consumption.
The idea there is revolutionary.
It really is. The anchor, the language, the background setting, even the presentation style can dynamically adapt to the individual viewer's preferences, making the news feel more relatable and accessible.
But, and this is the key part, the core element, the underlying facts, the journalistic message, that all remains rigid, sourced from reputable journalism, and verified by human editors.
So the synthetic messenger essentially becomes a fluid, adaptable interface.
For a rigid, verified database of facts. Exactly.
Okay, let's move to weather forecasting. This provides an incredibly compelling, almost irrefutable case for the synthetic messenger's utility.
I agree. Weather data is a masterpiece of complex, verified scientific input temperature models, wind speeds, pressure systems. but that complex data has to be communicated clearly and often personally, especially when safety is at risk.
In the case of meteorologist Amy Freeze, licensing her likeness to create a trusted digital twin is such a powerful example of this.
It is, because it's not about replacing her, it's about scaling her expertise.
Right. The biological Amy Freeze cannot be in a million places at once. She can't personally deliver hyper-localized forecasts, addressing every single microclimate and neighborhood simultaneously.
But her digital twin can. It represents an exponential scalability of a trusted expert's voice and presence. The mechanism is really elegant in its simplicity.
So the message.
The message, the detailed, localized forecast, comes from massive, verified meteorological models, like the ones from the weather company.
And the messenger.
The messenger is the synthetic construct of a highly trusted, known expert. That expertise and familiarity provide a crucial layer of trust that aids public comprehension and compliance, particularly during severe weather events.
And this is where the question of blame allocation becomes crystal clear. If the forecast is wrong, say the computer model predicted snow, but the temperature didn't drop enough and it just rained, the fault lies unequivocally with the verified data model.
With the source of the message.
Right. It does not lie with the avatar who just read the script faithfully.
Attacking the avatar for a wrong forecast is, as the sources note, a fundamental category error. It's like blaming the printing press for a typographical error or criticizing the ink on the page because the article contained a factual mistake.
The avatar just serves as a trusted conduit.
Exactly. And because Amy Freeze is an established, credible entity, that credibility seamlessly transfers to the digital twin, allowing this specialized data to be consumed by the public effectively and at a massive scale.
Now let's talk about the corporate and education sectors. They're already realizing massive, measurable returns on investment by fully embracing synthetic delivery.
Yeah, creating high-quality, engaging educational and training content is historically a huge bottleneck. It's expensive, time-consuming, and once it's recorded, it's totally inflexible.
The ability of these synthetic media platforms to decouple video production from the high fixed costs of traditional media, the cameras, the lighting crew, studio rental, travel, human actor fees, it's transformative.
It allows for rapid, scalable content updates that were just impossible before.
Let's look at the metrics that justify this. Corporations have shared some really compelling bottom-line data. Bosch, the massive engineering firm, they achieved a staggering 70% cost saving in video production for their mandatory training modules.
Wow, 70%.
But even more importantly, that cost efficiency led directly to a measurable 30% increase in overall learning engagement among their employees. That is a massive return on a digital investment.
And another major financial services firm, Wise, reported reducing their overall production time by 20% while simultaneously increasing learner engagement by 5%.
And the flexibility factor is equally crucial. Imagine a major change in a global accounting standard or a critical shift in a compliance law, something that might render an entire year's worth of training video obsolete overnight.
Right. Previously, that would have required expensive, time-consuming reshoots, sometimes forcing companies to lag dangerously behind regulatory compliance deadlines.
But with synthetic media, you just edit the text script to reflect the new regulation, and the video regenerates in minutes, perfectly synchronized to the avatar's voice and gestures.
It makes training content instantly compliant, evergreen, and globally scalable.
Beyond the efficiency, though, the research fundamentally supports that these embodied agents, which is the term for these teaching avatars designed to look and behave like instructors, they actually significantly improve student learning outcomes.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, a meta-analysis of 46 different studies found a moderate but highly significant positive effect, an effect size of 0.406 of embodied learning on student performance.
So why does that happen? What's the mechanism?
Well, the AI isn't just a static text reader. The advanced models provide these subtle, crucial social cues that facilitate cognitive processing. Realistic gaze tracking, appropriate nodding, changes in tonal variation, and slight body movements that signal attention.
So those micro-behaviors are neurologically important.
They are. They reduce the sense of isolation often associated with purely digital, passive learning. Studies showed that students in AI-enhanced active learning environments reported 13 times more learner talk time and achieved 54% higher test scores compared to students in passive, text-only settings.
That's a huge difference.
It's massive. And to stigmatize this technology out of generalized deepfake fear is to actively deny students and employees access to personalized, highly effective, instantly scalable tutors. The pedagogical argument is clear. Don't kill the messenger, or you stop the learning and innovation.
And if the corporate training benefits are compelling, the ethical case for accessibility is profound.
This is, for me, the most powerful example of the neutral utility of synthetic media, targeting communities that are often severely underserved by traditional media delivery.
We're talking specifically about the deaf and hard of hearing community. While static captions are certainly useful, they often miss the prosody, the emotional nuance, the rhythm, and the full grammatical complexity of native sign language.
Right, American Sign Language, ASL, it has a structure that's entirely independent of spoken English.
It does, and this is where advanced AI sign language avatars come in. These are being developed to translate text or speech directly into sign language in real time.
So this can be instantly overlaid on live news broadcasts, public service announcements, or sports events.
Exactly, offering a native fidelity experience that feels authentic to the viewer. It also elegantly solves the technical or logistical challenge of integrating a human interpreter picture-in-picture, which is complex, expensive, and difficult to staff 247.
So the ethical stake here is enormous.
It is. We have to recognize that the impulse to reject all synthetic media, the collective fear generated by deepfakes, would directly harm inclusivity efforts. In the vast majority of cases, the AI avatar is not replacing a human interpreter who is readily available.
It's replacing silence.
It is. It's replacing silence. It is replacing confusing or incomplete text, or it's providing service where human expertise is geographically or logistically unavailable. It acts as a critical bridge.
Connecting the hearing and non-hearing worlds at scale. To reject this messenger is effectively to silence a crucial message for an entire community. The utility here isn't economic, it's humanitarian.
And we often focus on the visual, the avatar, the video, but the audio domain is undergoing an equally rapid and quiet transformation.
You mean like in radio?
Yeah, think about local radio broadcasting, a sector where budgets have been decimated and local staffing has just evaporated over the last decade.
This is the democratization of local news delivery. Platforms like Radio GPT, developed by Futuri Media, are fundamentally changing the landscape. Their function is one of highly efficient synthesis.
Right. They scan local social media feeds and regional news sources to identify trending topics.
And then they use powerful LLM technology like GPT-3 to instantly generate a coherent conversational script about those topics. And finally, they deliver it using hyper-realistic, customizable AI voices.
And again, the misunderstanding arises in categorization. Critics quickly label this fake radio or bot news.
But the utility for local information is undeniable. A Pennsylvania radio group, for instance, used this technology to turn breaking local stories into short, shareable audio and video clips in minutes, significantly increasing their local digital engagement and filling crucial information gaps left by disappearing human reporters.
So the key is that the underlying data, local weather, local news alerts, local events, is sourced and substantiated even if its collection and final delivery are automated.
Right. The AI is simply a mechanism to keep local information flowing efficiently in markets that can no longer financially support a fully staffed human crew operating 24 hours a day. It is fighting information deserts, not creating disinformation.
The disembodied messenger is just as vital as the visual avatar.
Okay, we've established the enormous substantiated utility of the messenger across multiple sectors. So why are we as a society so eager to kill it?
The answer is rooted in deep human psychology. We're wired to trust our eyes and our ears implicitly, and the trauma caused by malicious deepfakes creates this powerful defensive reflex that is misdirected against the medium itself.
You're pointing to a recognized psychological phenomenon. In the classical sense, we have the shooting the messenger effect, the tendency to dislike or blame the innocent bearer of genuinely bad news. But in the digital world, this morphs into something more dangerous, shooting the medium.
It's cognitive displacement. When a person encounters one highly successful malicious deepfake, for example, a sophisticated video scam featuring a trusted CEO or a deeply violating NCII video, they don't just blame the fraudster or the criminal.
They blame the tech.
They do. They cognitively tag all synthetic video or even all AI content as inherently fake, dangerous, or untrustworthy. The anger is misdirected. It's focused on the technology itself, the messenger, rather than the human fraudster, the sender, who wrote the deceptive script.
And this is often exacerbated by our discomfort with the nearly human.
Yes, the infamous uncanny valley, that sense of unease or revulsion we get from something that is almost but not quite perfectly human. However, the sources suggest that recent research is challenging the idea that initial creepiness permanently destroys trust.
Ah, so here's where the science gets interesting.
It does. Studies are showing that extremely high realism in avatars doesn't necessarily maintain that creepiness. In fact, higher realism can actually enhance trustworthiness, provided the avatar exhibits consistency and human-like responsiveness.
Like realistic blinking, precise gaze tracking, and spontaneous nodding.
Exactly. The avatar's perceived competence and reliability can override that initial valley of discomfort. And we have to account for brand transfer.
Meaning, if the brand is trusted, the avatar is trusted.
Pretty much. If an avatar represents a known, credible entity, a licensed meteorologist, a reputable news organization, or a major corporation with a history of compliance, that pre-existing institutional credibility transfers to the digital twin. We trust the sender, so we grant provisional trust to the synthetic messenger.
Which proves that the human element, the brand integrity or the journalistic process, remains the key determinant of trust, even when the final delivery mechanism is synthetic.
Right.
This brings us to the strategic threat that goes beyond mere fraud and strikes at epistemology, the very nature of truth and knowledge. This is the liar's dividend, and it is the most insidious result of the deepfake panic.
This concept, which was coined by legal scholars observing this phenomenon, is a massive strategic benefit handed to bad actors simply because of widespread public panic.
The environment is ripe for exploitation.
It is. Poll data shows that over 85% of Americans are already highly concerned about deepfakes, meaning public skepticism is already dangerously high.
And this skepticism is instantly weaponized. Consider a politician or a CEO caught on a genuine unaltered videotape or audio recording doing something illegal or unethical.
In the current climate, they can simply release a denial claiming that's a deepfake.
And because the public is primed to distrust synthetic media and they know the technology exists, a significant portion of the audience may genuinely believe the denial, regardless of the evidence.
This is the profound paradox you mentioned earlier. By aggressively stigmatizing all AI video, by killing the messenger indiscriminately, we inadvertently strengthen the liar's dividend. If we teach the public that every piece of AI-generated video is inherently suspect or fake, we are eroding the entire epistemological foundation of video evidence altogether.
Let's consider the historical precedent. Legal systems were built on the idea that recorded audio or videotape was largely immutable, a hard record of reality. We did have scandals involving analog tape editing, but it was difficult, expensive, and traceable.
And now, the ease of creation combined with the public's high anxiety means we are losing the fundamental ability to use video as proof. If we cannot authoritatively distinguish between a substantiated, credentialed, AI-delivered news report and a malicious fabrication designed to spread confusion,
Then we lose the ability to trust any media entirely.
Exactly. The ultimate societal outcome is the death of shared truth, where every inconvenient piece of evidence can be dismissed with a single unprovable denial.
The conclusion is terrifyingly simple. Don't kill the messenger, or you guarantee the demise of verifiable truth. Our failure to draw a sharp distinction between the neutral vessel and the imposter creates a systemic loophole that undermines democracy and justice.
And while the psychological harm is a long-term societal corrosion, the financial and personal harm caused by the imposter messenger is immediate, tangible, and staggering. We have to fully grasp the severity of this threat to understand why the defense of the legitimate messenger is so urgent.
On the financial side, the scale of the fraud is immense. Deepfake financial fraud is savaging global finance, with losses projected to reach $40 billion in the U.S. alone by 2027.
The $40 billion.
This isn't just phishing. This is corporate sabotage orchestrated with the precision of Hollywood CGI.
The landmark case involving the global engineering firm Arup serves as a chilling illustration of the psychological sophistication involved. An employee in a regional office was tricked into transferring $25.5 million to fraudulent accounts.
And this wasn't just a voice call.
No, it was a full, convincing video conference call. What the employee saw and heard were highly realistic deepfakes of the company's CFO and several other trusted colleagues, all present in the same video room.
The psychological advantage is clear. They didn't just clone one voice, they cloned multiple trusted authorities simultaneously in a high-stakes, high-pressure virtual environment.
And that visual presence, that immediate sense of authority and consensus, made the fraud successful. It replicates the trust dynamics of a real boardroom entirely digitally.
We must also acknowledge the non-consensual exploitation, or NCII, which causes the most visceral personal harm. This is often the impetus behind the strongest push for regulation.
It is, and the sources highlight the legislative response in the United States, specifically the Take It Down Act, which passed in 2025.
And what's fascinating about this legislation, as the sources analyze it, is that it sets a model for good governance in this space, because it correctly targets the act of non-consensual creation and distribution.
It creates federal criminal liability for the distribution of such material.
Which aligns perfectly with the "don't kill the messenger" philosophy. The law aims its firepower at the sender of the harmful message, the human criminal creating and spreading the NCII, not the underlying generative AI technology itself.
Right, which in another context could be used to create an AI sign language avatar to aid the disabled. It is focusing on intent and action, not the mathematical tool.
And finally, there's the political weaponization. The imposter messenger is a pure weapon of confusion. We've seen examples like robocalls impersonating President Biden, attempting to spread confusion before an election.
Or fabricated videos of political leaders saying inflammatory things.
And the primary goal is often not just to make people believe the fake, but to create enough doubt, enough noise that citizens cease to believe anything at all, directly feeding that liar's dividend we discuss.
So the collective threat is simultaneously societal, financial, and intensely personal.
So we've confirmed the technology is neutral, and the danger stems entirely from malicious human intent. The crucial philosophical question now is, how do we regulate intent without crushing essential utility?
Well, the central thesis of the defense is that the AI avatar is a neutral vessel, morally inert until it's directed by a human agent.
So it comes down to human responsibility.
Absolutely. When we look at philosophical frameworks regarding autonomous systems, the concept of guidance control is paramount. The moral and legal responsibility must lie squarely with the human guiding the system. We must think of the AI as a high-powered, incredibly complex tool. Its sophisticated paintbrush, a rendering engine, a digital font.
The human agent who inputs the malicious script bears the entire responsibility for the output.
They do. We need to retrain our intellectual reflex when we encounter suspicious AI media. Instead of immediately asking, what is wrong with this technology, we must ask, who wrote the script? Who authorized this content? Is the underlying message substantiated and credentialed?
The anger, the legal scrutiny, the financial penalties must be directed exclusively at the originator of the falsehood, not the entity that merely rendered the pixels.
And this distinction is not academic. The failure to enforce it leads to severe real-world consequences, primarily regulatory overcorrection and innovation chill.
Right. We see this daily. Major content platforms like YouTube and TikTok are struggling to differentiate, often resorting to clumsy moderation techniques like shadow banning or completely blocking legitimate synthetic media startups because they're automatically flagged as deepfakes or spam.
They're treating the verified signal as noise, indiscriminately wiping out beneficial content.
And the investment community gets spooked. While the deepfake detection market is projected to boom, legitimate synthetic media companies, the ones creating scalable education and accessibility tools, they face immense scrutiny.
Because investors are naturally wary of funding technologies that might be legislated out of existence or subjected to crushing existential liability.
So overregulating the tool, the AI generator, rather than focusing the regulation on the malicious act fraud, defamation, or NCII, is a historical error.
It's intellectually akin to banning all printing presses because they can be used to print libel, or banning all photographic film because it could be used for illicit purposes. We have to regulate the malice, not the medium.
This brings us squarely to the technological solution, the architecture of trust. Since our eyes are fundamentally compromised as arbiters of truth, we have to shift our focus entirely to trusting the provenance of the media. We need a verifiable truth layer.
The foundational solution here lies in the Coalition for Content Provenance and Authenticity, universally known as C2PA.
C2PA.
And this isn't a company. It's an open international technical standard. It uses industrial-grade cryptography to create a tamper-evident, verifiable manifest that travels with the file itself no matter where it goes.
So think of this manifest like a highly sophisticated digital nutrition label or maybe a supply chain ledger for media.
That's a great analogy. This manifest records the asset's entire history from its moment of creation, who generated it, what specific software tools were used, and, crucially, every major change or edit that was made along the way. It's the media's indelible birth certificate and CV combined.
And this verification data is often visualized to the user as a small, universally recognized CR icon for content credentials.
Right. You click that icon, and it instantly reveals the provenance data, giving you the full origin story of the media you are viewing. It lets you bypass the pixels and go straight to the facts of its creation.
And this is how a C2PA specifically defends the legitimate synthetic messenger. For our AI news anchor example, the C2PA manifest certifies 3 things that overcome the liar's dividend.
Okay, what are they?
First, source. It clearly states who is responsible, for example, the mail broadcasting network. Second, tool. It specifies what AI model was used, for example, Synthesia 4.0. And third, content binding. This is the most crucial part.
Content binding.
The manifest proves that the generated audio and video script matches, cryptographically, the verified human-written text file published on the news organization's website.
So this binding is the technological solution to the entire problem.
It is. It allows you, the user, to verify with certainty that the avatar, the messenger, is faithfully reciting the substantiated text, the message. If that manifest is broken or missing or shows evidence of tampering, you know instantly not to trust the messenger.
The tool provides the necessary, non-subjective differentiation that the human eye just can no longer provide.
But a critical concern the listener must have is about durability. What happens when that file is shared on WhatsApp, or compressed by social media platforms like Instagram, or simply screenshotted and re-encoded? Doesn't all that crucial cryptographic metadata get stripped out?
That is the fundamental weakness of standard metadata, which is easily stripped. C2PA addresses this directly through features called soft binding.
Soft bindings.
Yeah. In addition to the standard manifest, C2PA uses invisible watermarking and perceptual hashing. These are algorithms that recognize the media based on its visual or audio characteristics, even if the file is compressed or slightly altered.
So even if a social media platform aggressively compresses or re-encodes the file, which they all do to save bandwidth, the provenance data can be recovered and reassociated with the media because the hash still identifies the original image or video structure.
The messenger's ID card is deeply ingrained into the media, making it incredibly difficult to throw away.
And finally, verifying the creation process isn't enough. We need verification tools for the message itself. Even if the avatar is credentialed, we need assurance that the script it's reading isn't pure nonsense or cleverly disguised disinformation.
Exactly. For high-stakes content like AI news anchors, linking the video output to the source text is paramount. This requires advanced source finder tools, like those being developed by companies such as GPT-0, or context citation verification systems like ContextCite.
And what do these do?
These tools analyze the AI-generated content and its source script to verify every claim against historical context and a database of reputable internet sources.
So systems are now being designed for what's called trigger-based verification.
That's right. Before an AI anchor is even allowed to broadcast, the script is subjected to multiple checks, LLM calls, database comparisons, and human editorial oversight to extract and verify every claim within the news article. Only then is the script approved and passed to the generative engine for the avatar to deliver.
Which ensures the messenger is only dispatched after the message has been thoroughly vetted for truth and integrity.
Absolutely.
So, what does this all mean? We've covered a lot of ground today, but the core takeaway seems clear. The synthetic avatar is an absolutely transformative communication tool, a neutral vessel of efficiency.
Right.
Its utility is profound, stretching from providing continuous 247 news access during crises to delivering radical accessibility improvements for the deaf community and offering highly engaging, cost-effective education for global compliance.
The danger is not the tool itself, but comes entirely from human intent and the malicious misuse of that tool, the deepfake imposter. The conclusion drawn from all these sources is indisputable. We have to differentiate.
We have to.
We must adopt a multi-layered defense strategy. Validate the message using source finders and editorial checks, credential the messenger using C2PA and cryptographic manifests, and punish the imposter through targeted, intent-focused legislation like the Take I Down Act.
We cannot and must not let the fear of deepfakes, the fear of the imposter-robbed society, of the massive necessary benefits of legitimate synthetic media delivery. We have to move past the ancient, unproductive impulse to kill the messenger.
And instead,
we must instead mandate that the messenger shows its ID, proving its origin and the integrity of the message it carries every single time.
Which raises an important question for you, the learner, to consider as you navigate the content you consume this week. If C2PA credentials become mandatory for all media platforms, not just for news organizations, but for individual social media uploads, for commercial content, and for political ads, what happens to the liar's dividend? If bad actors can no longer convincingly claim it's deepfake simply because they cannot produce the verified manifest, will that single technological requirement restore our shared faith in recorded evidence? That is the battle for truth we are fighting right now.